So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me a bit about what you do in the realm of VR and accessibility.
Hi, my name is Christian Vogler, and I work for Gallaudet University. I lead a research group actually called the Technical Access Program. And in this group that we focus on access and communication, specifically for the deaf and hard of hearing. It's a very broad kind of research. We actually investigate many different topics, but one of the topics relates to VR and access. So right now our goal, we're interested in how captioning works in VR. We want to be able to have live communication with others in the metaverse. I know right now it's kind of a little bit on hold, but I am confident that it will come back and we will be ready to investigate that further. So it's a very complicated topic. How to show where to focus when you're looking at a person and still capture the captions of what they're saying. So last year we were working with a project upstate. Yes. Upstate. We were working on a project upstate, and we were investigating further. Undergrad. I'm sorry. Let me go back. You may want to edit that. Yep. Okay. Go back about the undergrad program again. Okay. So last year, last summer, we were working with an undergrad student who was involved in the research program, and we were working, shadowing, mentoring them, and we were working with captions in the VR program and what that would look like.
Okay, and maybe you could give a little bit more of a context for your background and your journey into working with virtual reality through gaming.
Sure. First, I will say that I'm a geek, and I love technology for everything, because technology offers me a whole new world. And my background is in computer science, but I have narrowed my focus into access for the last 12 years. I started becoming interested in virtual reality because actually I read a book called Snow Crash, thank you. I read a book called Snow Crash, and I just was fascinated with it. And I thought, wow, you know what, I'm probably going to read this book over and over and over again, as much as I have time for. And then VR headsets actually became available and affordable, so I got one, and I started playing around with it. And I was playing games first, but I want to add that I think gaming can actually become a serious business. And the reason why I believe that is my observation so far is that gaming can be very experimental. It could be used as research to find out and create new things. So my goal with Access is I want to see people to be as creative as they possibly can through gaming. You know, it's amazing. It's an amazing new world that you can learn through gaming. And I think that can apply more broadly.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear a little bit more context for, the warnings that you have from moving captions from 2D to 3D, and not just to replicate all of the bad patterns that you had relative to what you said as low resolution television captions, and how the captions are being translated into 3D, and the challenges of directing attention and information overload, and potentially also how haptics might be able to add another modality of interaction when it comes to captioning.
So as a deaf and hard of hearing person, we are very visual people. So you get a lot of information through the visual environment. But it's also a risk of information overload, as you said. You'll see something, and I think a lot of research needs to be done on how auditory information can translate into visual information. But I think a lot of people don't really realize that your visual attention is actually limited. So as deaf and hard of hearing people, we have to be able to divide our attention. And we struggle with that, of like that split attention that I speak of. So for example, if you're looking at a person and you're communicating, you're having a conversation with them, and you're looking at the interpreter to actually get the translation of what the person is saying. For example, you're telling me, look at that thing over there. I have to make the decision whether to look over there, to look at the interpreter, or to look at you. It's impossible to split my attention in 3 separate ways. So I can't get all the information at one time. So often that means that a deaf or hard of hearing person can miss some information. It's hard to control that, and it can become very overwhelming. So I would apply that to the immersive environment as well. If you're trying to represent sound or visual cues in a visual way, you're asking for us to take a lot in at once. And we only have a certain amount of visual attention that we are able to invest. So I think it's a serious issue. We need to seriously figure out how to add another way, another modality. Haptics is one way, haptic feedback. If you look at haptic feedbacks, it's actually very clear. You have many options. It's an obvious choice. Part of the reason would be because haptic feedback would also work for a blind person too, or somebody who has low vision. Low vision blind people can relate to that. That's another way of getting information, and that can also apply to the deaf and hard of hearing community. So I'm really actually surprised that Apple, for example, for their new headsets, some of them, they're hands-free. I'm like, okay, all right, that's very cool, but what about haptic feedback?
Yeah, and one of the points that you made yesterday was around the form factor of the VR headsets and how they actually interfere with your cochlear implants, and I'd love to hear you maybe elaborate on that point.
Feel free to do a close-up on my cochlear if you'd like to check that out. Yeah, okay, so there's the processor that transmits the sound there, and there's also a magnet, as you can see back there. And many VR headsets hit about right there in that spot that I was just pointing out, and it blocks it puts pressure on it. So once you put it on, and you like adjust it so it's tight enough and it fits your head, it puts pressure on that magnet right there in the back, and it will often cause it to just fall right off. So the problem is, unfortunately, many VR headsets have 2 options. I can just take my cochlear implants, 2 options for me. I can just take them off, and then if I take my cochlear implants off, I hear nothing. And the other option would be, I just have to deal with it. Being uncomfortable, but it really doesn't work anyway. So that's the situation we're dealing with right now. Haptic feedback would be my best solution. It would make the difference. It would work best for I actually have a PSVR 2. I have that right now, and many of the games on that system are fabulous. They have fabulous haptic feedback. So that's the situation. I'm fine with taking my cochlear implants off as long as I have, that feedback from haptics, because then I can really get fully immersed into the world. But unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to hear any of the sounds because I'd have to take my cochlear implants off. I wish I could have both. But the point is, we really have to look at the issues and figure out a solution for them.
Great. And finally, what do you think the ultimate potential of virtual reality with accessibility in mind? might be and what it might be able to enable.
So I'm going to try to answer that briefly, but sign language, there it is, right there. Sign language is a 3D language. So if you're using sign language on a computer screen or a phone, that's a 2D world. It's not the same. To be fully immersed into the environment and to have sign language fully supported, where everything is in space, it's in a 3D world, that would change everything. The second part of your question, do you mind?
Oh, what it might be able to enable.
That's a question. That's a really good question. I'm going to have to think about that for a moment. I don't want to answer a one-size-fits-all answer. So for me, the awesome and most exciting thing and potential would be collaboration. So for example, a deaf person, I mean, we're actually very spread out. Often we're very isolated. And the numbers are decreasing. So it's sometimes hard to find your community and to actually have face-to-face interactions. So, and I also mentioned that a 2D interaction is not always the perfect ideal situation. So to actually be able to interact with people, with anyone, and learn from each other in an immersive environment would be incredible. So that changes, I think that changes it. And for industries, how could that enable something in industries? I think, for example, we find a lot of pressure to commit to work and training. Sometimes we have to travel very far, but training, practice. In practice, sometimes we have to go very far for work, and that's a struggle. So I think that's the missing part. I think VR, virtual world, is a missing part. I could see a lot of potential for being creative for everyone, and I think it could be a very powerful tool to connect to people and to be able to work together.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.